Today, I'm headed back to play at the brand new card room in Las Colinas, TCH Social, and right now we are trying to pad the bankroll as I'm leaving for the WSOP in just a few days. We had a nice little tournament score for a profit of around $315. Then yesterday, booked a nice win of $995. So today, let's see if we can head up there, get some good hands for the vlog, and of course, win some cash. I'll see you guys there. Alright, it's time to get our last cash game session in before heading to the WSOP. I'm going to be there the entire summer, and the first tournament I'm playing is the Tournament of Champions $1 Million free roll because I won a World Series of Poker circuit ring just a few months ago. Let's try to get one last win under our belt so we can pad the bankroll before we make the trek out to Vegas. So, we're going to play this 2-5, 1500 max buy-in, and I'm going to be in for $1,000. In one of the very first hands we get involved with, there's an under the gun straddle at $10. I'm in middle position and look down at ace deuce of diamonds. We're gonna get in the mix, open up this suited ace, I raise to 30. Only the straddler calls, so we go heads up to a flop of deuce 3-7 with one diamond. He checks to me, and we do have a pair, although it's not a great one. We can fold out some of his equity like overcards, hands that can improve over ours on the turn. So I bet $20, he makes the call. The turn is the 10 of hearts, he checks, and now we do have some showdown value. Let's see if we can get to a cheap river. I check behind. The river's an offsuit 3, and now he leads out for $50. I've had the pleasure of playing with this opponent many times throughout my sessions here at TCH, and he definitely likes to put in bluffs. He can have total air here. There are some missed straight draws, gut shots, and backdoor flush draws that miss, so he can show up here with some bluffs. We're gonna look him up for this price. I make the call, and he doesn't show, he mucks, so we don't have to show either, and we take down our first pot. In this hand, our table is 6-handed, so we're a little bit short, and under the gun raises to $20. I'm on the button and look down at king 7 of hearts. Normally, this would just be a fold, and if we are going to play it, should probably play as a 3-bet, but I decide to flat this time. The big blind comes along as well, so we go 3 ways to a flop of jack, jack 3 with 1 heart. It checks around to me, and if I'm going to call with my suited king here on the button, I should probably start putting in bets, especially with our backdoor heart draw. We can take control of this pot, especially when the original raiser checks this flop. He's going to have some weaker ace highs, and I would think most or all of his stronger made hands. We can continue barreling on this flop. When we start betting in position here, we can put pressure on all of his ace highs. We have king high, so it's not necessarily a great showdown hand, but I do land on a check. The turn is the king of clubs, so now we make top pair. The original raiser under the gun now bets $40. Can't go anywhere now after we make top pair. I put in the call. There's absolutely no point in raising. We keep all worse hands in, and if somehow we're beat, we keep the pot manageable. The big blind folds, so now we head to a river card, which is an offsuit 4, and now my opponent bets $80. He's trying to tell the story that he has a jack, potentially a hand like aces, kings, or ace king. However, we can't fold when he's repping such a narrow range in this spot. We have top pair. We're gonna flick in the call, and once I called, my opponent didn't want to flip over his hand, so he went to muck, and I went to muck as well. However, he wanted to see my hand, so he flipped his over, and he had ace 10 offsuit. I flip over my hand, and we take down a very nice pot. In this hand, the $10 straddle is on, and there's a limp in the low jack. I'm next to act and look down ace queen of diamonds. We're gonna raise this one up to $40. Everyone else folds, the straddle folds, and the low jack puts in the call, so we're going heads up to a flop of jack 6-5 with 1 diamond. We have 2 overcards, some backdoor straight possibilities, and backdoor flush draw, so I'm gonna continue firing here. We don't need to go too big, so I bet $25 and my opponent calls. The turn is the king of diamonds, and my opponent checks to me yet again. If this card wasn't the king of diamonds, I think we could start pulling out, meaning we could start betting a very big sizing, possibly even overbet, try to polarize and rep a very, very strong hand, as it's very unlikely that this king helped my opponent, and we can get him to fold a lot of hands that have us beat at the moment, like 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, etc., and start putting pressure on any of his jack X combinations and probably get those to fold with a big river bet. However, because it's the king of diamonds, we now turn a lot of equity. We now have a gut shot and the nut flush draw. So because of this, we don't want to fold out some of his hands, like if for example he has a hand like 9-8 of diamonds, we want to keep those types of hands in, so I land on a bet size of $80. Another reason our bet on the turn doesn't need to be too big is now our opponent is going to start folding all hands like pocket 7s and 8s, 9s, etc. So our bet doesn't need to be too big to be profitable and get him to fold. In this hand, we get ourselves into an interesting situation where there's a limp under the gun, the hijack limps, and I'm on the button and look down at queen 10 of hearts. I can certainly put in a raise here, but this time I decide to go the more passive route and put in the call. The small blind then makes it $25, so we all call and go to a flop 4 ways of Queen 6-6 rainbow. The small blind now leads out for $75. Both the limpers call the $75, and now it's on me. We still have to worry about a very strong range from the small blind, raising pre-flop, and then leading this flop into multiple opponents, and then when the limpers call, there's so many 6x combinations they can have in their range, or just have a better queen than me. This is not a great spot. Even though it seems like an extremely tight fold, to peel the flop, hit top pair, and then fold, I think this is one of those spots where we're just beat because there's so many opponents in the pot. And don't forget, we're splitting our equity with all the opponents in the hand. So I do toss my cards into the muck, and it turns out that both the limpers had a 6, one had king 6 suited and the other one had 6-7, and the player who had 6-7 lost a massive pot, got felted, and we ended up losing the minimum by folding the flop. In this hand, there's not too much to talk about as I look down at pocket 8s under the gun and I raise to $15. Only the big blind calls, so we go heads up to a flop of queen, deuce, deuce with 2 spades. He checks, we bet $15, he folds, and we take it down. Moving on to this next hand where I pick up another pocket pair. There's a $10 straddle and it folds all the way around to the button and he raises to $25. He's definitely an opponent who can raise a wider range than normal, especially when it's folded to him in position. But I'm in the small blind and look down at pocket jacks. I'm gonna raise a little bit larger here, being out of position, and I make it $90. The big blind folds, the straddler folds, the button thinks for a little bit and then tosses his cards in, so we pick up a nice little pot with the straddle on and some dead money. In this hand, we find ourselves in a really bad spot. There's a $10 button straddle on, and I look down at pocket 5s. I make the call, the big blind, the cutoff, and the button. We're all going 4 ways to a flop of 4, 5, 7 with 2 hearts, so we flop middle set with our pocket 5s. This is definitely a flop we can lead, especially with our set, and I bet $20. The cutoff calls and the button calls, and the turn is an offsuit 3. This is one of the worst cards we could possibly see. Now any 6 makes a straight. So being out of position, trying to keep the pot manageable, especially with the flush draw still on board, I check. The cutoff checks as well, and now the button bets $65. I'm not loving it at all, however, him being on the button, he can start putting in a lot of bluffs here, trying to get us off all of our equity. So I put in the call, hoping that we can see a paired board on the river, and then to my surprise, the cutoff then raises to $310. What? The cutoff is a player that I've played against quite a few times. He's always shown up with the nuts or a very, very strong holding whenever he puts money into the pot. It's not saying that he's not capable of bluffing, because he does play a lot of hands that don't get to showdown because he plays them so aggressively. He seems to be a pretty competent player, but it would be so ambitious of him to put in a check raise here without him having a straight in this spot. Unless he has some info on the button that I'm not sure about, he also has to be worrying about me. This is also a pretty massive raise size. In general, at these stakes, I have to assume I'm beat, as it would be so ambitious of him to put in a bluff raise in this spot. So I fold, and also very annoying to see the button fold as well, so I wish the button would have checked through there and we would have been able to see a river card. However, maybe we were still beat. I don't know, very tough spot. Let me know in the comments what you guys would have done, because that was a very, very interesting and gross spot. In this hand, I'm under the gun and look down at pocket 8s. I raise to $15. The hijack calls, and then the cutoff, the same opponent who raised to $310 last hand, he raises to $60. I'm gonna call here and try to flop a set against these opponents, so we both call and head 3 ways to a flop of king 5-3 rainbow. Unfortunately, no flop set for us on this hand, and we have to check fold to a bet of $75. Now at this point in the session, it kind of feels like things just aren't going our way. Things started off pretty well, and then after that flop set of 5s, things just have gone a little bit south. But it's important to try and keep your composure and continue to play spots to the best of your ability. In this hand, the $10 straddle is on, and the player to my right, in the low jack, raises to $35. I'm in the cutoff next act and look down at pocket kings. I don't need to raise too big, especially after the straddle and my opponent raising slightly bigger, so I raise to 90. He thinks for a little bit and then makes the call. Everyone else folds, so we go heads up to a flop of ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds. We finally get a big hand, and then of course we have to see the dreaded ace on the flop. However, when he checks it to me, we still want to continue here, we want to deny equity to some hands, and just because an ace comes doesn't mean our hand isn't still good, so I put in a bet of $75, trying to get value from all straight draws, flush draws, 10x combinations, and hands like pocket jacks. My opponent makes the call, and we head to a turn card which is a 6 of hearts. My opponent checks yet again. This is a pretty terrible card in the sense of it doesn't improve our hand, and it can improve my opponent's hand some of the time if he has a hand like 7-9 suited, 8-6 suited, etc. So we are in position here and get to see what our opponent does on the river before we do anything, so I'm going to check back and at this point hope to get to a cheap showdown. The river is the nut low card. It is the 9 of diamonds, so as if this board couldn't have got any worse, there's a flush and a 4 card straight on board. If my opponent bets here, I'm going to be absolutely sick. He is a very capable player who loves to put in big bluffs, so I was really expecting to see a big bet come in on this river card. It's a great spot for him to bluff or get value from all of my strong ace-x combinations. However, he has no idea I have pocket kings. But thankfully, the poker gods have heard our prayers because he puts in the check. I couldn't check fast enough. My opponent says, I just have a 10. I flip over my hand and we finally win a nice pot. Thankfully, didn't have to face a bet on the river. I might have had to put in the hero call depending on the sizing, especially against this particular opponent. However, we didn't have a tough decision and just get to win the pot. After that hand, things are headed back in the right direction. I won a few more smaller pots, including a multi-way pot where I somehow held up with pocket threes against many opponents on a very scary board. I then played a very juicy bomb pot where I chopped it with another player, so I ended up profiting about $250 on the bomb pot hand, which leads us to our very last hand of the night. Alright, this was the very last hand I played for the night where there's raise under the gun to $15, a couple callers in middle position, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at Jack 10 offsuit. Definitely not the best hand in the world, would way more prefer if this was suited, but let's see what develops. I make the call and we go 4 ways to a flop of 4 Jack 5 with 2 spades. The under the gun original raiser bets $30. There's a call in middle position, and then I'm gonna peel here, see if our hand can improve on the turn, and sure enough it does. We bink the 10 of spades for top 2 pair. Now the under the gun raiser checks, the middle position player checks, and now I bet $60. Only the under the gun player calls, so we are headed to a river card, which is the 8 of hearts. The under the gun player checks yet again, and I would assume at this point, because he raised under the gun, bet the flop, check called on the turn, it seems like he has a hand like ace king or ace queen. We have to go for some value though, so I bet $75. Unfortunately for us, our opponent folds, but we do pick up a nice pot to end the session. So it's time to rack up our chips, head to the cage, cash out, and get this show on the road because next stop is the World Series of Poker. I was in the game for $1,200, cashed out with $1,440 for a profit of $240, and this is going to wrap up our bankroll challenge. I thought I was going to be able to get more sessions in, but I only got in 3. We had 1 tournament, 2 cash game sessions, and this totaled over $1,500 in profit in just 3 sessions. And if you're wondering what I use to track all of my stats, I use Poker Analytics. The more serious you become about your game, the more you need the appropriate tools to assist you. Poker Analytics has elite tracking capabilities that will cover all needs from novice players to top pros. So check out my link in the description and download it and give it a try today. I promise you, you will absolutely love it.
Alright, so that session was pretty interesting. Things started off pretty good, and then in the middle there, when we ended up having to fold that set, which I think was the correct play, things went a little bit south, but we were able to regain and pick up some nice pots there at the end. So I was in for $1,200, out for $1,440 for a profit of $240, and our bankroll challenge is in full effect now. We've had a total of 3 sessions so far, 1 tournament, 2 gash games, and so far we are up about $1,500, so not a bad start. If you guys enjoyed the vlog, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started on this journey. It's only up from here, and I'll see you guys next time.